President Biden says the new Omicron variant is cause for concern, not a cause for panic. The director of the National Institutes of Health says it'll take weeks to figure out if vaccines are effective against Omicron. But he says there are good reasons to think it'll probably be okay. The White House's holiday decorations are up. This year's theme is Gifts from the Heart. This comes as Hanukkah started Sunday night, earlier than usual. And we sat down with psychologist Dr. Quinn-Cirillo to hear some tips on navigating the stress around the upcoming holiday seasons. Tune into Deep Dive as we explore these topics and more. Hello and welcome. This is Deep Dive and I'm Tiffany Meier. Now that Thanksgiving is over, the focus is on the next big holidays. The new Omicron variant upping stress around the holidays, from traveling to family gatherings to what to get amid inflation fears. We sat down with Dr. Quinn-Cirillo to hear some tips on navigating through that. But first, some updates. President Biden says the new coronavirus Omicron variant will be in the U.S. sooner or later, but that it shouldn't start a panic. He says there's still a lot of unknowns about the variant. Biden spoke about the variant at the White House on Monday.
This variant is a cause for concern, not a cause for panic. We have the best vaccine in the world, the best medicines, the best scientists, and we're learning more every single day. And we'll fight this variant with scientific and knowledgeable actions and speed, not chaos and confusion.
One big question with a new variant: are the vaccines effective against it? The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention is working with state health officials to determine whether the variant is already in the U.S. Vaccine makers are also looking at how effective their doses are against Omicron. The director of the National Institutes of Health, Dr. Francis Collins, said on Sunday there is no data yet that Omicron causes more serious illness than previous variants.
We have no data so far to suggest that it would be. There's even a bit of a report from South Africa that maybe people with this are milder than the usual case, but they're mostly young people who have mild illness anyway. So I would say we just don't know. We do think it's more contagious when you look at how rapidly it spread through multiple districts in South Africa.
As of Monday morning, no Omicron cases had been detected yet in the United States. But a senior scholar at the Johns Hopkins University Center for Health Security says it probably already is in the U.S.
It's likely something that is here at a low level. Delta still continues to be the predominant variant, but I would not be surprised at all to see that Omicron is already here and possibly spreading in small clusters.
Meanwhile, new travel restrictions went into effect Monday to limit travel from several countries in southern Africa, where the variant was first detected. And with all the uncertainty around the new variant, some are saying this holiday season is similar to 2020, from travel restrictions to family gatherings to budget limits on holiday shopping. We sat down with psychologist Dr. Quinn-Cirillo to learn of ways to navigate these times. Tara, welcome. Great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me.
So this year's holiday season and added stress on top of the pandemic and the restrictions is money. Inflation is at a 31-year high, and maybe some people are struggling with trying to figure out how to keep up the holiday spirit without breaking the bank. So what are some ways of still staying in that holiday spirit without having to spend a fortune?
Coming back to those values, we can get so tied up, especially in current times, I think, over what I would call material things. So how much we're spending, what our gifts look like, how much food we have. Again, I think social media does play a huge role in our expectations now over how things should look and what people are expecting. And actually, again, if we can come, I said a lot, if you can come back to your values, your family knows you, your close friends, whoever you're spending the holiday season with, they know you. And actually, if you were to ask them what's important, what you're buying them, how much you're spending on food, actually, how many of them would say actually they value that over you and what you stand for? So I think really sometimes it's our brains. Our brains are fantastic things. They're like a human computer between our ears, but the problem is they can race forward with what they think are going to happen, what they think people think of us. And actually, once we can notice when our brains are racing forward and go, hang on a minute, what matters here? Is it how much I spend? And sometimes we're not great, most of us, at having what we call difficult conversations. So maybe talking to people and kind of saying, I've had a difficult year this year, what should we do about gifts? For some people I know, they don't do gifts anymore, or they'll do a draw where they perhaps choose one person each to buy gifts for. So just reinventing Christmas, reinventing the holidays, coming back to what's really important to you. Maybe asking people to bring a dish each, really breaking things down into small, manageable chunks. But often we don't think about that when our brains are racing ahead with anxiety and we can get really overwhelmed. We're also really good at thinking we're going to get judged. And that's a really powerful thing to try and move away from, isn't it? That what will people think of me? But actually, if you're able to come back to your own self-esteem and your own self-worth and go, people are not going to judge me, or they're not my friend for how much I spend on them, what I do for them. Hopefully they're there for me because of who I am, and I think that's something really important that we can all get back to, especially with what we've been through in the pandemic, because most people have reevaluated what's really important in life when we haven't been able to do all of those things that we take for granted.
And so you brought up social media and maybe the image there. And so what about the people who maybe don't have anyone to celebrate with? Or maybe they can't travel this year and they're seeing all these images on social media about how it's supposed to be the most wonderful time of the year. But for them, it's not. And new research is showing that depression rates have climbed 5% in the last year. So for people in this situation, or people who might know people in that situation, what would be some tips for them?
So if you're not choosing to spend Christmas or the holiday season on your own, how can you connect with family and loved ones through other ways? I know a lot of people have what we call video online fatigue from socialising online, but what are the ways you can connect with people? Can you phone? Can you WhatsApp talk? Can you video call them? Can you try and do Christmas in a different way this year? But if you are on your own, can you reach out? Can you help others? It's a really high evidence base for compassion for yourself and other people to make you feel good. So if you can reach out, if you are on your own this Christmas, and that's through no fault of your own, but you're able to perhaps help someone out, it can be something as small as leaving a small note for your neighbour to say Merry Christmas, or I hear you had a rough couple of weeks, right up to helping out at a shelter, or something more formal, serving out Christmas meals, for example. It's evidence based to make you feel good through the act of helping others. So that's something really important. If you are on your own and you struggle, some people struggle with social anxiety, some people really do struggle with the holidays, is what can you do for yourself? It's a really good time to take some time out for some what we call self-care. So building up your own resilience, building up your own mood, finding mood enhancing things to do, connecting. Taking time out is evidence-based to build up your resilience, which we all need more of as a result of this pandemic. So putting on nostalgic Christmas movies, choosing some food that you really want to eat, taking some time away from social media, from the phone, from the laptop, from work, can be so good for us all. So getting a balance. But obviously, I wouldn't be doing my job properly if I didn't say, if you're noticing a pattern of withdrawals from people, things that usually are things that you enjoy, do seek help, because there is a difference between you choosing to spend Christmas on your own, or circumstances maybe dictating that this year or last year, but a longer term pattern of losing interest in people, of finding it difficult to get motivated to go out. That's when you need to reach out. We can never stress enough how important it is to talk and communicate and tell people how you feel, because I think at the moment with this pandemic there will be many people who can understand that and can relate to it.
And so you mentioned examples of noticing a lack of enjoyment and things that would normally be enjoyable. But maybe for some people there's a stigma around reaching out, or maybe they're afraid of reaching out. So what would be some tips for people who don't want to reach out but who are struggling?
We're human beings. Sometimes our brains get overwhelmed with life, and it's really normal. And if you are someone who has been approached by somebody, I would also urge you to take that time to hear. There is a difference between asking someone how you are and not waiting for that response, versus being present, sitting with them and being prepared to listen to that answer. And if you can, hear them rather than jumping straight in with advice. Sometimes we want to magic things better. Sometimes we might minimise without realising that we're doing it. I'm sure you'll be fine. I'm sure it's nothing to worry about. But actually what that can do is invalidate someone's feelings. So if you can, and it can be tricky, sit, hear, and let that person know that you've heard them. I'm so sorry to hear that you're struggling at the moment. That sounds really difficult for you. Is there anything I can do to help? Is there anything you want to do but you're struggling? Can I help you reach out to somebody? So kind of getting that balance between hearing, being present, but not offering too much advice that might make the person back off. Sometimes it's hard to have those conversations, but it can mean the absolute world to someone to be heard, to be validated, and letting them have that autonomy of reaching out. But obviously if you're really worried about someone who's been at home for a long time, who's withdrawing, who doesn't look well in themselves, where you've noticed big changes, I would urge you then to maybe speak to other friends to come up with a plan of action to support that person.
And any last words of advice?
I think really just if we can try and give each other a break. What's really hard at the moment is many of us are 18 months plus into this pandemic, aren't we? And we are feeling frustrated. The biggest thing I'm hearing from my patients is how frustrated they are with all of this. And that's a normal emotion too. Sometimes anger, frustration gets a rough ride because the behaviours associated with it are usually quite negative. But I think if you're in that queue for the airport, you're in that queue for the train, you're in that queue for a coffee, and people are getting feisty and people are being verbally aggressive, is just trying to think what is behind that behaviour. Sometimes people don't mean to behave in the way that they do, but their emotions can take over. So if we can try and show a bit of compassion, if we can try and help each other, give each other a break if we're snappy, if we're struggling, and just think, actually, do you know what? We've all worked so hard, haven't we, during this pandemic? And we're trying. We are super resilient, but there will be days where we snap. There will be days where we're not proud of our behaviour, but to try and give each other a break. I think that's a really important message that we can all take home.
Tara, thank you so much for joining us today. Great to have you.
You're welcome.
And now before we end, the White House is ready for the holidays. First Lady Jill Biden is unveiling this year's holiday theme and decor, titled Gifts from the Heart. Her office says it was inspired in part by the challenges of the pandemic. More than 100 volunteers from the local area spent a week decorating the inside and outside of the White House. The display includes 41 Christmas trees, about 6,000 feet of ribbon, 300 candles, more than 10,000 ornaments, and nearly 79,000 holiday lights. Biden will be joined by a number of National Guard members and their families later on Monday to enjoy the festivities. This comes as Hanukkah kicked off earlier than usual, starting Sunday night. A rabbi lit the first candle on the National Hanukkah Menorah to mark the first night of the 8-day Jewish holiday tradition. Typically falling closer to Christmas, or at least in the month of December, this year's Hanukkah starts Thanksgiving weekend. At sundown on Sunday, Jewish families lit the menorah and kids opened presents, often one for each of the 8 nights. Some families adapted traditional foods to the Thanksgiving holiday this year, serving potato latkes instead of mashed or sweet potatoes. And this will be the first Hanukkah to be officially celebrated in the Vice President's residence, the Naval Observatory. But what do you think? Let me know below. Thanks for tuning into Deep Dive. I'm Tiffany Meier, and see you soon.